So, as usual on the Rochford files, a story goes down or pretty much develops during towards the back end of my show, which I miss. But the important thing is I try to cover as much as I can and not let important stories like these pass by. So on Friday, Derek Chauvin officially got his sentencing 22 and a half years. Chauvin, in a light gray suit and tie and white shirt, spoke briefly before the sentence was imposed, offering his condolences to the Floyd family. Under Minnesota law, Chauvin will serve two-thirds of his sentence, or 15 years, and he will be eligible for supervised release for the remaining 7.5 years. The sentence exceeds the Minnesota sentencing guideline range of 10 years and 8 months to 15 years for the crime. Floyd's death sparked massive protests across the nation over police brutality. Judge Peter Cahill said the sentence was not based on emotion or public opinion. He wanted to acknowledge the deep and tremendous pain that all the families are feeling, especially the Floyd family, the judge said. In a 22-page memorandum, Cahill wrote that two aggravating factors warranted a harsher sentence, that Chauvin abused his power of trust or authority and treated Floyd with particular cruelty. Chauvin, the judge wrote, treated Floyd without respect and denied him the dignity owed to all human beings. Cahill said the former officer objectively remained indifferent to Mr. Floyd's pleas, even as Mr. Floyd was begging for his life and obviously terrified by the knowledge that he was likely to die. Mr. Chauvin's prolonged restraint of Mr. Floyd was also much longer and more painful than the typical scenario in a second degree or third degree murder or second degree manslaughter case, the judge wrote. Chauvin will remain in a restricted housing unit separated from the general population at the Minnesota Correctional Facility, or Park Heights, for the time being. Minnesota Department of Corrections spokesperson Sarah Fitzgerald told CNN his ultimate placement is undermined, but his safety will be our predominant concern when determining final placement, Fitzgerald said, adding Chauvin has been on administrative segregation status for his general safety. People watch hearing on phone at corner where Floyd was killed. Chauvin was convicted in April on charges of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter for his role in Floyd's death. Floyd's final moments captured on scene, cell phone footage by a 17-year-old, illustrated in clear visuals what Black Americans have long said about the criminal justice system treats Black people. Floyd's death set off mass protests across the globe, as well as incidents of looting and unrest. At the intersection of Chicago Avenue and 38th Street in Minneapolis, where Floyd took his last breaths, people watched the hearing on mobile phones. Outside the court complex, Floyd supporters expressed mixed emotions about the prison term. Floyd's sister, Bridget, who founded the George Floyd Memorial Foundation, said in a statement that the sentence shows that matters of police brutality are finally being taken seriously. However, we have a long way to go and many changes to make before Black and brown people finally feel like they're being treated fairly and humanely by law enforcement in this country, she added. Floyd family attorney Ben Crump said in a statement, "The historic statement brings the family and country one step closer to healing and by delivering closure and accountability." I'm going to say, unfortunately, this is going to give the idea of more of a false type of healing and accountability, rather than a idea of a true one. And I think, and as I said, when the charges being placed happened just before my show went live last month. And I wanted to say that I said this was done as a sacrifice to get people to still have faith in this system. And that's the statement that I'll disagree with from the attorney, because this really isn't the case, because there's still several other cases that have happened across the country where you're not getting anywhere close to this outcome. Whether it be Elijah McClain, Andrew Brown, Adam Toledo, and several other black men and women, and Brown as well, who have been victims of police brutality, and their case hasn't gotten anywhere to this type of outcome. With Chauvin's sentence, we take a significant step forward, something that was unimaginable a very short time ago, he said. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison told reporters he hoped that this moment will give us pause and allow us to rededicate ourselves to the real societal change that will move us much further along the road to justice. My hope is that he takes time to learn something about the man whose life he took, and about the movement that rose up to call for justice in the wake of George Floyd's torture and death. He said of Chauvin, "Today is also an important moment for our country. The outcome of this case is critically important, but by itself, it's not enough." Chauvin's defense attorney, Eric Nelson, declined to comment. So this right there is still the issue. There's some people who are definitely more principled about being prison abolitionist, and I understand why this is a outcome that doesn't really move them. And there's also people who the idea of prison has been so embedded into the minds of the American people that it's in a way feels insulting that Derek Chauvin only got 22 and a half years for this case, and to think that he could be out for 15. So I wanted to put out both sides of that aspect. And even though with the way the system currently stands, it is a disappointment that this is no longer punishment for Chauvin. But at the same time, as we work towards a system that abolishes prisons, I can understand the other side of the argument where reform is an essential part of society as well. Chauvin offers condolences to Floyd's family. After members of Floyd's family delivered victim impact statements, Chauvin stepped up to the lectern, cited his lawyer, and said, "I want to give my condolences to the Floyd family." He said pending legal matters prevented him from saying more. The victim impact statements included an emotional video from Floyd's 7-year-old daughter, Gianna, who wore a bow wrapped around her hair. I ask about him all the time, the little girl said. I miss you and I love you, she said, when asked about what she would tell her father. Chauvin, wearing a face covering, listened from the defense table. Floyd's two brothers and nephews spoke about the birthday parties, graduations, and other family milestones he will miss. Philonis Floyd says he has nightmares in which he hears about his brother pleading for his life and calling out to their mother. He said he relives the video of his brother being tortured to death by Chauvin, especially the smirk on the former cop's face. My family and I have been given a life sentence. We will never get George back, he said. Philonis wiped tears from his eyes as he spoke about Gianna. Terrence Floyd, another brother, struggled to speak as he asked for the maximum penalty. We don't want to see no more slaps on the wrist, nephew, Brandon Williams said. We've been through that already in my community and my culture. Carolyn Pallanti, Chauvin's mother, grew emotional as she described him as her favorite son and a good man. She said the happiest moments in her life were when Chauvin was born and when she pinned his badge on his uniform for the first time. Derek, I want you to know I've always believed in your innocence and I will never waver from that, she said. Chauvin's post-verdict motion for a new trial was denied by Cahill hours before hearing. And this was another thing that really caught a lot of attention was his mother with the emotional statements that as you notice in the media, these are the type of things that they tend to over-glorify with white families who are involved in shootings. And I'm saying this because they also glorify the statements when they talk about how sad they are for the people that they miss. But they so often ignore the statements of family members of the black victims of police brutality throughout this country. And you notice it in the framing that you often see even with the common white mass shooters that are in this country. And it's also another issue that, while, yes, you're going to be conflicted as a family member, but who of a murderer, whether it's one that wears a uniform or not. But the facts are, I don't have the type of bias that would allow me to make a statement like that when the evidence is pretty clear to me. I would even be willing to make a strong statement against a family member who committed an act as heinous as Derek Chauvin or any of the other act of police brutality, a white mass shooter. And I just think that's a thing that the media shines light on too bright. Let's jump down a bit. Prosecutors had asked for a 30-year sentence. State prosecutors had requested a 30-year prison sentence, saying it would properly account for the profound impact of defendant's conduct on the victim's family, and the community, according to a sentencing amendment. Nelson argued for probation and time served, at least a sentence less than what the law guides. Mr. Chauvin asked the court to look beyond the findings to his background, his lack of criminal history, his amenability to the probation, to the unusual facts of this case, and to his being a product of the broken system, Nelson wrote in a finding. Ah, yes, that same broken system where, there were like 5 instances of police brutality that former Attorney General and current Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar let you off on? Yes. If there was real accountability in place, Derek Chauvin would have lost his job a long-ass time ago. And if the system wasn't as so far gone, as broken as it is now, there would be a lot more turnover in the police industry, and so many more people would lose their jobs over this. The guilty verdict on all 3 charges against Chauvin came nearly a year after he impassively kneed on the neck and back of Floyd. Impassively? What? That looked like an extremely aggressive knee to me. Handcuffed and lying prone for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Under officers' knees, the 46-year-old black man gasped for air, repeatedly exclaimed, "I can't breathe," and ultimately went silent as a group of horrified bystanders looked on. Chauvin arrived at the court complex in downtown Minneapolis hours before sentencing. 3 other officers who were on the scene during Floyd's fatal arrest, Thao, Thomas Lane, and Alexander Kung, have not pleaded guilty to charges of aiding and abetting. The trial is currently set for March 2022. So let's state the reality of the facts that even though Derek Chauvin, as I've said, is the main sacrificial lamb to try to make sure people have some type of faith in this current court system. But I'm going to bet that all these 3 other guys who were accountable by association are probably not going to probably going to avoid charges. And they really should be charged as well. Since his conviction, Chauvin has been held at Minnesota Correctional Facility, Oak Park Heights, outside of Minneapolis, and was put in a segregated housing unit for his own safety. Let's see, is anything else? So yes, this is the part that I wanted to get into more. Legally, Chauvin could have faced up to 40 years in prison, up to 25 years for 3rd degree, and up to 10 for manslaughter. 2nd-degree murder said Chauvin assaulted Floyd with his knee, which intentionally caused Floyd's death. Disagree once again. I think if you know that we may have not known that the knee to the back and neck area would be able to cause something like this, but to call it unintentional, once you get close to 10 minutes, I think you're far beyond the road of unintentional. The 3rd-degree murder said Chauvin acted with a depraved mind, and the manslaughter charges, culpable negligence, caused Floyd's death. Chauvin had no prior criminal record, but he definitely should have, for like those 4 other instances where He got let off the hook, as I said, by former Attorney General Klobuchar. And the sentencing guidelines recommend about 20 to 12 and a half years for each charge and about 4 for manslaughter. In this case, state prosecutors asked for a tougher sentence than the recommendations provide, citing 5 aggregating factors they said applied. Cahill ruled that 4 of the 5 factors were proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Chauvin abused a position of trust and authority. He treated Floyd with a particular cruelty. Children were present during the offense. 4. Chauvin committed the crime as a group with active participation of at least 3 other people. So this last part right here is the main thing I wanted to get into. Yes, it really should have been a 40-year charge just based on what the confines of the current system. But at the same time, I think there would be a lot of people who would be willing to take the concession of this current punishment of 22 and a half years if you free all the non-violent black and brown drug offenses, free all the non-violent shoplifters, to the biggest groups of people that are in our prison system. And if those people were freed, then it'd be a much fairer concession to feel better about the sentence. And that was a great point that I think Affinity of the Fred Hampton leftist made on Saturday with Rome on their stream. And I felt like that was a great framing to present about this whole sentencing, even though Affinity is a big advocate of prison abolition. And I'm very supportive of the idea as well. Although with the current confines of the system, there's way too many people in it. And we need to start by letting go of the non-violent drug offenders and shoplifters, because those are a big chunk of the people that occupy the prison system, and they usually get far harsher sentences in this unequal system of justice. And we gotta start somewhere with, it probably won't be an instant abolition overnight, but a great start would be making sure that those 2 groups that I mentioned are freed and are able to get their lives back on track. And that's pretty much it here. I mean, if Chauvin did manage to get the maximum 40 years, that could potentially mean the rest of his life. But the reality is, he's probably going to get a chance to be free at some point, be alive to be out of the system, man. Unless it gets cruel to. Just know that this isn't the end here, and remember to be critical of the idea of what they push here. That's the idea of the false dichotomy of suddenly having faith in the system. Just don't forget about all the other victims of police brutality, especially since then, who haven't even got an iota of justice compared to this.